All right, Nick, let's talk about the Miami Hurricanes. We've talked about it a lot this offseason. Really strong offseason, really good start to everything for the Hurricanes here. I think everything is going very, very well for them. But that doesn't stop. It keeps on moving. And this latest flip for the Hurricanes, I think, is the best thing yet. They've gotten a really, really interesting player here. And I think Miami fans are going to love this one. But before we jump into that, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, the Hurricanes' big time recruiting news came just a day or so ago. This is going to be a really huge update for them. Let's jump straight on into it. We'll break it down on the other side. This is from SI.com. It says, for the second time this week, Miami has landed a commitment in the class of 2026. Since backing off a verbal commitment to Florida in mid-February, the Hurricanes have been trending to land the top 24/7 cornerback Jaylen Waters. Throughout the process, Waters has earned offers from the likes of Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Oregon, Florida, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, USC, and Florida State. That is like every top player that is out there, and amongst many others. The 6'2", 185-pounder becomes the fifth addition to join Miami's class, which now ranks number 19 in the 24/7 Sports team rankings. I think this is a big get for the Hurricanes. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Hurricanes fans, in the comment section below, let us know. What are you thinking about this offseason? I think it's been really big. I think there's been a lot of great moves, a lot of great hires all over the board for the Hurricanes. But let us know, what are you the most excited about? Spring ball is right around the corner. Is there a certain player that you're looking for? Is there maybe a certain shift in the scheme of things that you're looking for? What do you want to see for this team that makes you really excited since spring ball is right around the corner? It's basically here at this point. Let us know in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, let's get to you. What are your thoughts on this latest for the Hurricanes?
Yeah, I think it's a really good move. What's interesting about Miami is obviously people blame their defense, and for rightly so, for the reasons they missed the college football playoff. But statistically, they were actually fourth in the ACC in passing yards surrendered per game. But then you have to remember the ACC is not a very deep league in terms of passing defense, right? So you have to understand that's a big problem. And Miami's doing a great job addressing it. They did it in the 2025 class. They brought in already four defensive backs. That's obviously a real intention to improve it. Now we see the Waters flip here from Florida State, from Florida, big, great Florida kid. Obviously, it's clear the Miami Hurricanes are trying to make their defense. They don't want to be top four. They want to be number one. And that's the approach you have to take in a league like the ACC, where it has some good top heavy guys, but the depth is mediocre. It's a little different than the SEC and the Big Ten, where there's so many really good teams at the top that it's almost impossible to be top one or top two in everything. The ACC is different. And because, right or wrongly, the perception of the ACC is it's not as good as those other conferences, it means you can't afford additional losses like the Miami Hurricanes found out. So I think addressing their defense for the long-term strategy is the right approach. Go really heavy in that regard. We know they've had success with transfer quarterbacks, obviously Cam Ward famously. We'll see what happens with Beck. So going after corners, I think, is a really smart approach. Relying on freshmen to come in, recruit, and develop, it's the right idea. One of the things we talk about all the time, and we mentioned it when we were talking about the USC Trojans a few days ago, is that there are certain areas, certain states that if you win those areas as a recruiting game, that you're going to win national titles, right? Obviously, the Miami Hurricanes knew that winning Florida for the better part of the 80s through the early 90s, and of course in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they were one of the great dynasties in history. USC had their own run winning Southern California, and that's the same approach we want to see here with Jaylen Waters is, are you winning the Florida kids? Are you dominating and beating out Gainesville in Tallahassee? And that's exactly what we're seeing more and more out of Miami. And that's no small feat. We knew Florida State was a debacle last year, but Norvell has done overall a solid job recruiting for the Florida State Seminoles. Billy Napier has done a good job recruiting for the Florida Gators. Their trend is very favorable in terms of acquiring talent and overall their team direction. So it's not like it's easy. It's not like Florida's a dumpster fire. It's not like Florida State, obviously last year they were a dumpster fire, but over the last 5 years, they've actually been okay. Despite that, Miami is doing a winning effort in the recruiting department. And this is one of those things that just really matters. And I know we want to see the Hurricanes win titles again, but I always feel like the first step to winning titles consistently is to winning 9, 10, 11 games per year, get more bites at the apple. Before the Georgia Bulldogs went on a mini title run, they were winning 10, 11, 12 games a year before losing to the Alabamas of the world. Then they finally overcame Alabama. They went on a mini run there, winning multiple titles, right? And they're in a great position to win another title this upcoming season as well. They're going to be right in the mix along with teams like Miami. So I think the Hurricanes, the goal has to be maintain a certain level of performance, right? There's going to be years you have injuries. There's going to be years where it's a magical run, but you can't have a year where you go, let's say 6-6 or something like that, and your recruiting and your transfer class just falls apart, right? You got to stay. You want to. I always talk about the Alabama line, where Alabama, their worst year was 10 wins. If you can maintain that sort of level of performance, it's hard to do, but if you can do that, you can constantly be competing for the top recruits, the 5 stars, the top transfers, the best NIL dollars coming into your program. You want to avoid falling under that number because then you're rated as a second tier program. Miami obviously isn't, and they weren't last year, and moves like this will help them maintain that high posture.
Yeah, Nick, and I just want to touch a little bit more on what Miami has done recruiting. And they've done something very smart. They've started small, whether where they are recruiting and who they're recruiting against, and they've started to build exponentially as well. And I think if we look the last three recruiting cycles, 2023 through 2025, Miami has had the number one class in the ACC the last three recruiting cycles. And you see what they've done in those cycles as far as Florida kids go. They got 16 guys out of the state of Florida in 2023. They got 15 guys out of the state of Florida in 2024. And then again in 2025, they got 13 guys out of the state of Florida. So, like you said, they've got to be able to dominate Florida. They got to be able to start strong there. That's their first and foremost because there's a lot of good teams trying to get all of that good talent out of the state of Florida. They've done that. They've dominated the ACC and they've shown this is how you build. You start to build this team, and we've seen from 2023 to now, this Miami team has gotten significantly better. They've climbed the ranks really quickly, and now we're looking at a college football playoff contending team. So I really like what they've done. I like this latest move. I think this is just another example that they're focusing on that same strategy in this 2026 class. Get another guy in Waters out of the state of Florida, kind of try to contend the state of Florida the best you can and be able to battle those other teams, flip those guys. Not only just because someone says, hey, I'm going to go to Florida, you got to kind of start and try to flip the other players out of Florida from those other teams. You got to win at all costs. And I think Mario Cristobal, he's really confident in doing just that. So I think overall, this strategy that we've seen out of Miami here, I think is a really good one. And I think it's proven to help make them much, much better. We've seen the results over the last few years. So I think them continuing on this trend of focusing on the state of Florida, I think now they go on because if you look at their recruiting rankings the last couple of seasons, they got 7th, they got 4th, and then I believe they got, 13th over the last three recruiting cycles. 13th was last year. They won the ACC, but now they need to look bigger. I think they need to be winning overall. They need to be one of the better recruiting teams in the country, get in that top three. They could break the top three. I think it would do a lot of really good things for Miami. But overall, I think they got a good strategy. It seems like over the past 3 years, they've been sticking to it. They've been getting the results they wanted. So I don't see any reason why Miami shouldn't be able to do that this coming cycle.
I agree 100%. I was just double check something here quick. And I think this is what we talked about it earlier this cycle about the great hires Miami has made on the coaching staff side with some assistants. And this is the Will Harris effect. Of course, their new defensive back, new safeties coach coming into the fold. This is a guy from Florida, from the University of Florida, spent time there, has connections, recruited very well for the Florida Gators. This is why making moves early in the offseason in terms of filling out your coaching staff is really important. We talk all the time with players. It's always good to start strong, but when you start the offseason strong, just like a player wants to start the offseason strong, you need to start it with great hires because those great hires are great recruiters if you get the good ones in and then you get the good players that follow. It becomes just a cycle. And I think this is where Cristobal deserves a lot of credit. He finds quality assistants. He's not stuck in the status quo and says, who can win me and develop me the best talent. And that's exactly why it goes after. We talked about multiple hires he's made, specifically in the defensive backfield. I think Will Harris has kind of slid under the radar as a great addition to this Hurricane staff. The NFL, I believe the New Orleans Saints were actually trying to pull him away from Miami. He said, no, I want to stay down in South Florida. And we're seeing the rewards of that. Again, it's not a one-off here. And I think that's a really big thing to focus here. This isn't just oh, well, the Gators, they offered, I'm sorry, the Hurricanes, they offered more NIL money, or this kid just was a fan of Miami more than he was of Florida State, or whatever it may be. That's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing a consistent trend for this Miami recruiting strategy. They're getting better on the defensive side. We know their offense is going to be really good. They're becoming a more complete team. They're becoming a championship team, right? It's the difference between being an upstart contender and being a well-rounded title team. And I think that's an important thing Miami had to address after last season. Last year, they were kind of the upstart contender with how good they were on offense. But the reality is winning titles, making deep playoff runs, it's all about being well-rounded, both sides of the ball. Playmakers on offense, defense, good lines, solid quarterback play. Ohio State proved that, right? Well-rounded, well-coached, good fundamentals with key star players across the ball. You can win a national championship. Notre Dame, very similar structure, made it to the national title game. That's exactly what Cristobal is trying to do here, develop a well-rounded, complete football team, and his strategy is working.